Welcome back to That's Helpful. I'm Ed Stott. Thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. I can't tell you how much joy it brings me sharing these brilliant conversations with you. If you just joined us for the first time, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss an episode. And if you've been listening for a while now and you're enjoying what I'm putting out, please leave me a review wherever you're listening. I really appreciate it. And there's been some absolutely beautiful ones that really bring me so much joy, and it helps other people find our little self-improvement club. So please do that. It takes like 2 seconds and I would be forever grateful. Now today, when it comes to role models, toddlers may not be the first people you think of. Their reputations for tantrums, impulsivity, distractedness, and just general chaos doesn't put them at the top of most people's lists. But Hasan Merali says they're wrong. He's a pediatric emergency doctor and the author of Sleep Well, Take Risks, Squish The Peas, Secrets from the Science of Toddlers for a Happier and More Successful Way of Life. Hasan, as I mentioned in my intro, it's not something people normally think of for toddlers to be, inspirational role models. But why did you decide to write the book? Where did this idea come from?
Oh, yeah. Well, thanks for having me on. And this idea really came over more than a decade. I've been in pediatrics for 14 years now. And I've had all these experiences, wonderful experiences with young children, toddlers and preschoolers, kind of in this magical age between 1 and 5, where they do things that truly inspire me. And, I'll just give you one example. I'm a pediatric ER doctor, so I see a lot of little kids with abdominal pain. And when that happens in the ER, we have to have them not eat for a while we get blood work and an ultrasound. And this is several hours. And when I go back in the room, I can usually tell them that they can eat again because most of the time it's okay. And they're excited and their parents are excited and they give them their favorite crackers. And, little kids love crackers. And these little kids will look at me and they're just, by looking at my face, able to detect that I haven't eaten also for 6 or 7 hours. And I very often will get the first, second, or third cracker. Sometimes they'll give me a little lick first, but they just are innately such kind and wonderful people and do things in such a different way than a lot of us do when we get older in terms of laughter and play and taking risks. And I was really inspired by this. And so I really wanted to get the record straight about who they are and also take that and take the research that I've done on them and map that to adult data on how this truly is inspirational. And if we were to act like them more, then we could improve our own lives.
I really love this idea because often on the show, we get some of the world's leading experts on all areas of life. And so often the common thread is that we are relearning what we already knew when we were born, right? There is so much fundamental information that toddlers just innately know, right?
Yeah, absolutely. They just know how to learn. They know how to ask questions. They don't hold back when they're asking questions or saying no. They know, what they really focus on are two things: learning and building relationships. And so with these things in mind, that really drives them forward to, laugh with another person and ask another person questions and take all these risks that help them learn so much. And these two drivers for them really make them who they are. And if we were to emulate a little bit of that, it would help us a lot too.
Yeah, I love it. And so on the surface, they obviously may not look like the best role models given their reputation for tantrums, etc. But why is that not the case? Why are they actually living proof that, we do know so much of this stuff innately?
Yeah, so it's good you mentioned tantrums. I think it's good to talk about kind of at the beginning because they get this reputation for, toddlers equals tantrums in a lot of people's minds. And understandably, you're walking through the grocery store minding your own business and there's this little person just having an absolute meltdown. And that's when we notice them, our kind of eyes and heads, and we turn towards them then. But what we don't see is the 11 to 12 hours a day that they're awake doing all these other things and, really making the world better, I would say.
Yeah.
And so what I want to focus on is how are they spending those 11 to 12 hours a day? Not the median time is 3 minutes for a tantrum. Half of them are less than that. It's one time a day, at the very most 10 minutes. But beyond that, they're doing all these amazing things. And, there's all these other myths about them, that they don't share, not true, that they have an easy life, also not true. But yeah, I want to just make sure that we really focus on what does the data say about them.
Yeah, I love that. And so physically, how are toddlers' brains different to adults? Like what enables them to be so brilliant in all these things?
Yeah, so when they're little, when we all are, we go through this process of building these synapses, these connections between the neurons in our brain at a much faster pace than any other period in our life because we're learning so much at that time. And then eventually we get to this point where we go through a process called pruning, where we don't need all those connections and we make our brains a little bit more efficient. And while we're more efficient and we can get to decisions a lot faster in some ways and process things in a more complex way, what we lose with that is the ability to notice details and look at things more in a general way. And I see this with my daughter. I have a 3-year-old and we walk to preschool every day. And for me, it's just a 5-minute straightforward walk and I'm not noticing a lot. But for her, and she's done this more than 100 times now, it's different every time. Like, why is that pylon a little bit in a different place than it was yesterday? Why is that cloud different? Let's jump in this puddle today that wasn't there yesterday. And it's a special experience that they have. And the other thing is they don't have this fully developed prefrontal cortex. And so they don't have this idea that we need to be planning ahead in the future a lot. And so what that does is it allows them to live in the moment. And because we're so far advanced in that ways, and of course there's advantages, we lose that spontaneity that we used to have and living in the moment that they have.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so key, isn't it? When you listen, if you spend any time with a toddler, it's pretty cool. You learn a lot, definitely. And so one of the big things that people absolutely love about toddlers, for that 12 hours a day, they're not having a tantrum, is that they are so great at laughter and continuously, trying to make other people laugh and making themselves laugh even. What should we learn from toddlers about laughter and this benefit?
Yeah, it's so true. I'm glad you said that they try to make others laugh too, because, if you're around a toddler, like there's nothing else you could do other than, move around, play games and laugh. And that's going to be what the activities involve. And, left to themselves, they even laugh even more. So when we put a mic on them and record them and it's just toddlers amongst themselves, they're laughing one time a minute, just about. And if you put adults by themselves, it's not close to that. It's about half of that, maybe.
Yeah.
And like I said, they really want to build relationships. And laughter is one of these tools that we can use to build relationships and also for learning. But when we laugh, we are more open and we are less stressed. And that helps us connect with other people in a better way. And so that's what they're really doing by making this other person laugh. They're really forming that connection. And the other thing that's fascinating is that we can use that also to build relationships, but to learn. And so toddlers are in this period of this immense learning. And if we laugh before we read, for example, or get new information, we actually retain that better. Or if we get information that's presented in a humorous way, we learn that better. And so it goes back to who they are. Laughter really helps them build relationships and learn. And we can also incorporate that into our lives to do those two things.
Yeah, and I guess it's tied to the fact that they can find joy in doing anything, right, too. So like even some of the most mundane tasks that we would absolutely, consider to be the worst parts of our day, like cooking dinner or, doing your chores or going to the grocery store, they can absolutely find joy in those things too, can't they?
Yeah, it's so key. And that's why the third part of my title is Squish the Peas, because, they're integrating play and laughter into just about everything they do. And yeah, they're really experts in it. And I've heard about this term called, going off these hypothetical cliffs. And the humor cliff is certainly one of them. Like when we start off when we're young, we're laughing quite a bit during the day. And this slowly goes down over time as we get out of childhood into older adulthood. Reading is the same thing. Play is the same thing. But yeah, with this laughter is something we can get back to. And I think it's such an easy thing to reintegrate into our lives that helps us in so many different ways.
Yeah, and I think so often as adults, we think that, if we're joking or laughing or like prioritizing making other people laugh, people won't take us seriously. And it's not helpful for our careers or any other aspect of our lives. But that's just not true, is it?
No, in fact, those are the people that people like more. And, for relationships, romantic relationships specifically, there's a lot of good data that is what attracts people to each other. And so it's incredibly important for that as well.
Yeah, so interesting. I love it. And so you touched on this a little bit before with the cracker sharing and that kind of thing, but toddlers are incredibly kind innately. What does the research say about just how kind toddlers are, and what should we take from that?
Yeah, they're so kind, and they've been tested in all of these different situations. And it's one of the themes that emerges is kindness. And I'll just give you one example. They took a bunch of 1-year-olds, and there was a stranger. They don't know this person, and they picked based on their parents what their favorite snack was, so some type of fruit. And they also made the toddlers wait till it was their snack time. And so they're very hungry. They have their favorite fruit in front of them. The stranger drops this fruit. And so they have a choice of what they're going to do with this right in front of them. And, keep in mind, these are people who can't get their own food. So this is a lucky thing that happens to them. And only 1/4 of the 1-year-olds ate the fruit. The rest of them shared. And the time it took them to share was 1.5 seconds. And so this is just who they are. This is what they want to be doing. And there's all these other scenarios with, robots, with animals, with people who are antisocial or selfish. They continue to share. And it's nice because I think the lesson there from us is about giving and kindness. When we look at studies about facial expressions with toddlers, we see that they get this much deeper sense of happiness when they give than they would if they were, for example, to find something and then give that away. If it's their own thing, they get a lot more happiness. And the adult data shows the same thing when we give to charity, volunteer our time. The benefits we get is a much deeper type of happiness than, the day-to-day things we get from, different types of wellness activities, for example.
Yeah, so cute, isn't it? Oh, it makes me happy just talking about toddlers because they're so cute. And so when we think about all these brilliant benefits that toddlers have, and kind of when we think about them, I guess anybody would be able to figure out that they were good things to be, like upbeat and joyful and kind. Why do you think it is that we find it so tricky now as adults to do things that come to toddlers so naturally?
Yeah, I think one of the things, and I think a lot about asking questions. I think that's probably the best example. We really, and this is one of these other clips where when we're little and we're toddlers and preschoolers, we are asking questions all of the time. Why, till we really dig deep into every topic. And this clearly falls off as we're older. And I think one of the reasons to get to your question is that we're very conscious about what the other person will think of us. Yeah. Whereas toddlers don't have that as much. They want to prioritize learning. And even with adults who know they should be asking questions, it holds them back because of their fear of what other people will think of them. But I think we should focus on the benefits. And so all adult data, clearly we learn more and can do things quicker if we ask questions, but also questions by itself is a relationship building tool. And so when you're asking people about what they said and feeding that back to them and asking more about them, that really strengthens that relationship and is just another great toddler lesson of what we can use from them.
Yes, so much knowledge here. And also, toddlers have a lot to teach us about risk-taking too, don't they?
Oh, absolutely. I think, a lot of what we've talked about right now, I think falls into the first half of my book where I talk about some toddler lessons that are generally for life. And then the second half of my book really focuses on all the workplace lessons we can get from them. And risk-taking is, I think, one of the best examples. for me, this is very clear because I am a pediatric ER doctor. And so a lot of what I do is doing a lot of suturing and a lot of putting on casts of little people because they just have no fear and they actually think they can fly a lot of times.
Yep.
And so, yeah, they don't have any issues with jumping around and hurting themselves. But it's great because as we get older, we get more risk averse. And because we get more risk averse, there's a bigger gap between how fast we can grow. And we grow from the risks we take. And that's why at that stage where they have the highest level of growth, they're taking the most risks. And even if you put them in scenarios where there's a guaranteed benefit, but there's a risky option, they always choose the risky option to their detriment. They'll often, get less reward, whatever that is, like food or crackers or stickers, and they love stickers.
Yeah.
But they don't want that thing. They want to be better at whatever they're trying to get to. And so they'll choose the risky option because they know that will help them grow and learn. And I think there's a very important lesson for our careers there that we're not going to grow and learn unless we do take those risks.
Absolutely. And so risk taking is a big thing that they're brilliant at, but also boundaries. They're really good at setting boundaries. And if you've ever tried to make a toddler do something that they don't want to do, you will know this, right? What's the lesson in boundaries for toddlers, for us from toddlers?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, there is nobody that even comes close to being able to say no more powerfully than a 2-year-old. It is just so clear and so direct, and there's no way they're doing it if they don't want to. And we kind of lose that as we get older. And I'm not saying we should be like that. I think we should do it in a more polite way. But we have this bias, again, getting to what we were talking about what other people will think of us if we say no. And so we tend to say yes to a lot of things. And the other thing, unfortunately for us, we're notoriously poor at judging how much time a certain task will take that comes to us.
Yeah.
And so putting these two things together, this bias to saying yes and not being able to figure out how much time something will take puts us, a lot of us in the situation where we have just overfilled calendars and overwhelm, and we're just behind and trying to catch up. And so this idea of being able to take a little bit more control for those of us who are able to, not everyone can, I think is important because that's how we get back that control and get back some of that time. And there's a lot of good strategies, for us to be able to do that. One of the things that we don't know how to plan properly about the amount of time something will take is called the planning fallacy. And something that can actually help is breaking that task down. So if you get a more complex task, breaking that down into 6, 7, 10 parts, and putting an estimate on the time of each of those parts can actually get you to a better time estimate of the whole thing. And so there's all these little strategies we can use to get to the toddler no in a nicer way. But I think the message is still clear that they know how to do it really well, and we can learn a lot from them.
Yeah, I love it. And I guess they go a lot more on instinct, don't they? And I think a lot of what they have is this innate sense of what they like and they don't like. And it hasn't been watered down by marketing and people telling them what to like and don't like and other people's opinions. Just like this instinctual, just knowing what they like and they don't like, which I think so many of us as adults just don't have.
You're absolutely right. They are so impulsive. And, some people think of that as a negative. But if you back that up with this strong sense of empathy and kindness they have, a lot of the decisions they make so quickly and impulsively are actually wonderful decisions. So, yeah, I think we can get a little bit back to that, too. We don't need a pros and cons chart for every decision we need to make. We can sometimes just know the right answer. And if we're, coming from a place of kindness like they do, then we're often going to make the best decision.
Yeah, and tune back into that intuition. I love that. And so they also often, when we're talking about the workplace, another great tactic that toddlers use is they talk to themselves in the third person. They encourage themselves and are really able to set themselves out of a situation. And that's incredibly helpful too, isn't it?
Yeah, they're so good. And they do it out loud, which is so cute and fun to observe.
Yeah.
And, when I go to preschool for my 3-year-old, it's a little cold here. And there's this little girl named Julie, and I see her putting on her little mittens, and she's saying, Julie can do it, as she's putting it on, and no one else is around. And then Colton, yeah, she's the best. And Colton, he's also just as cute. He's looking at his shoes because he just realized that he didn't put them on right. And he says, Colton didn't do it right. And this type of feedback that they give themselves out loud is called private speech. And we know from the data that it's actually incredibly helpful for them to be able to do their tasks. But if we translate that to adults, it's equally as helpful. For example, just a quick one for you, for anybody who likes to play sports. If there's a study where people are taking free throw shots, one group is told to say nothing and just take the shots. One group is told to say the word relax before they shoot. And the third group is told to say faster. And who do you think gets the most shots in? It's the people who said out loud relax before they shot. And just this one word can make such a big difference. And for us, we might be a little embarrassed to say it out loud, and that's totally fine because we can talk to ourselves without saying it out loud. But the key really is to talk to ourselves in third person, like a lot of little toddlers and little kids do. And the specific situations that this has been studied the most are anxiety-provoking situations. So, in the workplace, when we're having to give a public talk, when we're meeting someone new, we should really be talking to ourselves in the third person about how we're feeling. And that can really decrease the emotional reactivity that's been shown with brainwave studies and really help us through those in a much better way. And on the flip side, sometimes we talk to ourselves in a very negative way and we're really down on ourselves. And so changing that to a different perspective can also help. One of the best tips I learned from Ethan Kross, who has a book called Chatter, it's wonderful for your listeners. He says that instead of, getting down on ourselves and talking about the things maybe we did wrong during the day, and this happens at night, which interferes with sleep a lot of times for people, is that just frame it differently in that you're giving advice or giving feedback to a friend rather than you yourself. Yeah. And as soon as you do that, like your whole tone changes of how you talk to that person, and we can just be kinder to ourselves that way.
Yeah, I think also, when you hear somebody, getting down on themselves or talking like that, like my husband was talking to me the other day and I was like, yeah, but you wouldn't tell me that, if I came to you with this problem, you wouldn't say to me, oh, Ed, that's ridiculous. You're being so stupid. You absolutely would not say that to me. And I think when you put it in that perspective of, you'd never tell your best friend that, you'd never tell like your husband that, you'd never tell the person that you really enjoy spending time with that. It just takes you out of that and you think, yeah, what, it's not helpful. And also if you said that to them, they'd probably tell you to sod off, And so I think if we can have that self-reflection of ourselves, it's really, really helpful. I love that. And so some of the things that, as I said, we're just born knowing how to do. One of them, which I am absolutely firmly in, solidarity with this thought, is that they just know how to eat. We as grown-ups could think, oh God, but what about the calories and the macros and what have I burned off? What do I need to eat? Da, da, da. They just are the original mindful eaters, right?
Absolutely. And that's another place where the Squish The Peas comes in, is that, I think the most important lesson we can take from them is that they listen to their bodies and they stop eating when they're full. They'll, start playing with their food when they're full, and they won't get to a point where they're overeating. And if we look at all the different age categories, who has the lowest rates of being overweight and obese, it's these little people, because they just don't get that. And as we get older, we eat for all these different reasons. We're bored, We're sad, we're watching TV, we're with other people who are eating, so we feel like we should eat too. But toddlers aren't like that. Like my little one, she does not need to eat if we're eating. She only eats if she's hungry. And that's a really important point, because that's one of the reasons a lot of us, myself included, get into trouble, is that we're eating for all these different reasons. But if we were able to listen to our bodies like they are, and now what is termed mindful eating, they've been doing this since the beginning of time, mindfully eating, then we would have a better relationship with food, I think. And one of the strategies, to leave your listeners with something practical, comes from the blue zones where, these places where people live 100 years, 90 years have been studied. And in Japan specifically, there's a term that they have called harahachibu. And what that means is that you eat until you feel 80% full. And, that's subjective, but you don't eat until you're absolutely full, because then we tend to overeat. And so if you can get to the place where you stop around that time and just feel a little bit hungry, that can also kind of, I think, get to, closer to where toddlers get to.
Yeah, absolutely. Because most of us, we now rely on those external signals for what constitutes full, right? Like, have we finished our plate? Is that a serving size? That kind of thing. Whereas I think when you're actually checking in and thinking about, oh, am I full? Which is one of the principles of intuitive eating, which I'm a big fan of. It's so much more helpful, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, the plate is a big deal. Like, we know that if we just change the plate size, we're going to eat less.
Yeah.
And, that kind of thing. And this idea, and I think this comes from a lot of the ways we were brought up, or societal, of like, finishing what's on your plate or one last bite, and these types of things, they're not helpful at all. And we just need to stop when we're full. It's so simple the way these little people live their lives, and we overcomplicate things, and it's really that simple.
Yeah, and perhaps a lesson in how we often corrupt these innate signals that young people have, like in how to eat and how to back themselves. Like, there's so much as we grow up that kind of knocks off those internal signals that are so valuable. I think there's a real lesson in that. And the other big one that you talk about is sleep, and how toddlers' sleep routines. There's a huge lesson here, right?
Oh, absolutely. And I'm glad you asked about that, because I think of almost all the things, sleep is just the foundation of improving your life. And I think if there's one thing that, listeners take, well, one or two things, but one thing that's really important is this toddler sleep routine, because it can really be life-changing. And if we can get on a sleep routine daily, if you're lucky enough to be able to do that, it can make a big difference in not only your physical health, but in your mental health too. And so I'll tell you the toddler sleep routine, because it's so simple.
Yes, please.
And so you pick a time that you're going to sleep. It needs to be a time that you're going to stick to. You start the routine an hour before. None of this has any screens. Like toddlers, there's no screens during this time. You start off, now step number one is a hot bath or shower. That is relaxing by itself, but it also cools your body because it dilates your blood vessels, and we need to be cooler when we sleep. So that's the first step. Second step, and this comes from toddlers, is they get lotion on them. And so I think that actually is really nice. You can find your favorite lotion and you can kind of do that, and those massage receptors will be activated, and that can be very relaxing by itself. If you're not into lotion,
boost.
Absolutely. You can substitute it with a hygiene-related activity, anything. And then the third, very importantly, as anyone will know if they're around a little kid, is story time. And so finishing your day with reading is critically important. I have a whole chapter in the book just about the importance of reading. But at nighttime, it's relaxing. And also, whatever you're reading, you're going to retain that information better if you sleep after you read. And it's a way that toddlers always want to end their night. And I think it's the best way, and they have it figured out. So hot bath, hygiene activity, reading a book, and that's it.
Yeah, you're good to go. Yeah, I can never make it past page 2 of a book if I'm reading it before bedtime. I'm done. It's like the ultimate sleep hack. I love it. Thank you so much, Hasan. This has been such a joy. So interesting. So many brilliant lessons and so many more in the book. But thank you for sharing with us. I really appreciate it.
It was great to be here. Thank you.
Such a joy. Hasan Merali is a pediatric emergency doctor, and his book is called Sleep Well, Take Risks, Squish the Peas, Secrets from the Science of Toddlers for a Happier and More Successful Way of Life. I'm going to link it in the show notes because it's so joyful. I really love it. There's so many so many great lessons in there, but also so many great lessons about the valuable things that we should try to preserve in our kids too, and not try and knock those innate senses that we are all born with. And have to work so hard to get back to when we're adults, like we're talking about now. I really hope that you're enjoying the show so far. If you are, please leave me a review wherever you're listening. Like I said, it helps other people find our little self-improvement club, and I absolutely adore reading them. So I'd be super grateful to you. I'm Ed Stott. I sincerely hope that's helpful.